32nd board, hot topics in the sport this week. So Haiden Deegan did not wrap up the title at Unadilla. Could have if he had won the race, but Joe Shimoda would have been hard to beat there. First, JT, I want to ask you this. The strategy for Deegan there, was it actually better to not wrap up the title early, which is dangerous and risky, as opposed to really risking it to beat Joe at Unadilla?
Well, I think he went in hoping to go win the race and clinch the championship. But as the race unfolds, you have to be able to think on your feet and understand the situation at hand. And to be fair, Joe was riding probably the best we've seen him ride all year. That first moto was phenomenal. So I think Haiden, once he understands, like, hey, I'm probably not going to beat him in this moto, maybe I'll get him in Moto 2, he's going to assess the risk and act accordingly, which is just another sign of Hayden's progression, both on the racetrack and mentally as we go. So both things can be true. He wanted to win, but he also understood that it was unlikely with the form that Joe was on. So he's just going to push it to next week at Budds Creek.
Okay, so that would lead to the logical 43-point lead with 2 motos to go. He could cruise at Budds Creek. We've also seen some riders wrap up the title at Budds Moto 1 and then really cruise in Moto 2. What do you think we're going to get from Deegan this weekend?
I think you're spot on there. I don't think that Haiden is looking to just cruise to the finish line here and win the championship by 30 or so points. That first moto, we'll see how he goes. You know, if Joe gets a great start and he's doing the same thing, could Haiden kind of lay up and take second? Maybe. If that happens, though, I will be looking for Haiden in the second moto to really show us what he's got. Because the last thing he wants to do is allow Joe to carry this momentum that he's built up. Build on that confidence that he got at Unadilla, let it fester at Budds Creek, and now we've got a real problem on our hands when we go into these SMX World Championship playoffs. So I would be looking for his best effort, especially in Moto 2, if he locks up that championship.
Yeah, and that's a huge difference than what we've seen in previous years. I go back to Osborne, Plessinger, them winning the 250 title, and then they could barely even ride the second moto because the emotion was gone. Now there's playoffs. Now there's momentum. And now Joe Shimoda is starting to get it. And we mentioned this several times on the broadcast at Unadilla, JT. He has been great in the SMX hybrid tracks format. I don't know what it is about the time of the year, the tracks, 3 races, pressure. I don't know. But Joe is great, nearly won in 23. He came back from injury and was fast in 24. This could be a real problem for Deegan.
Yeah, Joe has been great, but we also have to recognize that Hayden's been better. Haiden has won both of the 2 SMX World Championship playoffs that we've had. So Joe has been great. Hayden's been better. And I think Hayden's going to want to continue that pathway. And you mentioned there kind of the loss of adrenaline, the loss of just momentum these riders feel when they win that championship. But oftentimes in those scenarios, it's because of months of suspense and not being able to sleep well and just constantly thinking about it. And then there's just this release that happens and they really can't kind of get up and find any intensity in that final moto. I don't think that's the case for Haiden because he really hasn't been under pressure in this championship for months. So I think it's going to go the other way for Haiden when once this burden is finally off, he's going to be able to ride freely and that intensity is going to come back.
Hey, that sets up what could be a really good battle this weekend. Even though the points would indicate it won't be and Deegan will just cruise, probably not. So keep watching Budds. On the other end, go to the 450 class. I asked a question in the press conference. I've been impressed all year. I believe Eli Tomac and the Lawrence brothers, this year they've really gotten to know each other. Tomac was barely racing in and out the previous 2 years that Jet was in the 450 class. And I've noticed in the press conferences, you've seen it on the podium, they've been quite cordial to each other. I asked where that's coming from, and it actually surprised me a little bit. Starts on the racetrack. Let's listen in.
Well, it all starts with the racetrack, and it's of course we're competitors, we're racing hard, but there's certain people that you're comfortable to race around, and these guys are totally respectful, and it's been fun racing. So of course I want to try to beat them a little bit more, but in the big picture, it's just good, respectful racing, and it's been fun.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, we all train towards the same thing, so it's like creating enemies in the wrong way is just not called for, you know. We all racing at the same time, and I know personally, I try to show the respect to Eli on the track and race clean, because I get more excitement of, okay, getting close, but still knowing it's safe, that I'm not going to go clean his front wheel out, do something stupid, you know, because that's, in my mind, that's just lazy way of riding. When you go take someone out, you hit them, dead down, you don't deal with them after because they already crashed. So it's like, I find racing's more fun for me when you pass them clean. You're going back and forth. You're using racecraft and getting crafty with things and stuff like that. And I think us showing the respect to Eli and other riders, that this kind of creates better racing, I feel like, because otherwise if you create enemies, it's just like not as fun. You don't like talking to that person. It's awkward. I mean, I feel like our family's a very fun, happy family. We treat everyone the same, whether you're a competitor or not. We give you the respect that you're due, and we obviously hope we get it back as well.
Yeah, there's no animosity to any of my competitors, and to race with a legend like Eli. And there's bunch of other legends in the class, and it's just all of us have pretty similar interests outside of the sport. And if we didn't race each other, you'd probably get along anyway. So why should the fact that you race each other interfere with that? We've been doing it long enough that it's our job. And we're professional on and off the track.
Okay, so there's a difference between you, JT, who've been on these tracks, and me. I thought it started with the podium stuff and the press conference interaction personally, but Eli said no. I like them because of what happens on the track first.
Yeah, being able to trust your competitor is a very underrated aspect of racing. And every racer knows that you can trust some guys and others you can't. Doesn't make them necessarily bad people. That's not what it's about. It's about trusting your competitor to not take a cheap shot. If you go to the outside, they're not going to go try to knock you out of the race. And there are guys that you simply can't trust. Justin Barcia, you don't go to the outside if Justin Barcia is trying to pass you. You simply don't. And I think what Eli is conveying there is that when he goes outside or it's a really tight battle, you can trust Hunter or Jet to not do the silly thing. They're not going to jeopardize each other's race or championship by taking a cheap shot. And that goes a long way to the relationships off the racetrack as well.
Okay, so next on the list, as mentioned, is Budds Creek. That's where Deegan will try to wrap the title, as mentioned. Take us on a tour, JT.
Well, Budds Creek is one of those racetracks that's universally liked. You'll very rarely hear a racer talk negatively about Budds Creek, and that's not common. Almost every rider has something negative to say about every racetrack. Welcome to Pro Motocross. But Budds Creek's a fun one. I think the elevation, it has great soil. It allows riders to be very aggressive. So a rider like Haiden Deegan, he can really lean into the things that he does well, which is a lot of throttle, high RPM, and the dirt will reward that. So of all the racetracks, there are a few that the riders truly enjoy going to and they have a fun time on race day, even if it's hot. I think Budds Creek falls into that category.
Budds Creek is funny. It has not hosted the finale of Pro Motocross very often. Now, there was an epic 92 finale it did host. Mike LaRocco had a giant points lead in the 125 class. He had a weekend where his bike broke in both motos. Jeff Emig got close in points. Then LaRocco had bike problems again at the Budds Creek finale, and Emig ended up winning the title in 92. People will remember that one because it was the finale, but oddly, JT, because Budds Creek has often been the next to last round, it's probably seen as many number one plates handed out as any race that has hosted the finale.
Yeah, we get a lot of those, the kind of locking the championship up moment like we saw for Jet Lawrence at Unadilla. But to me, when you say the words Budds Creek history, I think of iconic moments that this track has seen over the years. James Stewart's come from behind win here on the 125, just unbelievable. Motocross of Nations 2007, where USA dominated in a fashion we have rarely seen at that race across any decade. Go back to that 92 between LaRocco and Emig. That was a huge weekend. But I think the one that I immediately think of is the 1995 Doug Henry crash that has been replayed throughout history. So it is an iconic racetrack, and whether championship or not, we have seen some of the biggest moments in racing happen at this very venue.
Also on the docket this weekend is WMX. Now, this is cool. There'll be 3 motos, 2 on Friday and 1 on Saturday that you can watch live on Peacock as the first and second motos are transitioning for the 250 and 450 class. Let's give a nod to Lala Turner, who's really been the dominant star of the series. But Charlie Cannon, we've been waiting for the Australian to gain strength and speed all year. It finally happened at Unadilla. That was as good a moto as we've seen between any 2 riders in any class this year.
Yeah, great job to Charlie for fighting back, because everybody was thinking Ironman, she's healthy, she's ready, she's coming in hot, and then Lala really shut that down. I thought Lala did a great job of kind of changing that narrative from the return of Charlie to business as usual. Well, credit to Charlie this weekend, because she got out there, she fought through that first moto, got a win. Now, Lala was able to return serve in Moto2 and get the overall win, but that battle the fight that we've been wanting to see shape up, we finally got at Unadilla. And you could make an argument that the best racing we have seen in 2025 Pro Motocross has been in this WMX class.
That's right. So there's 3 motos you can watch, and Turner will try to lock up the title early, maybe, but that third moto on Saturday should be awesome. It's 3 motos because they missed 1 at Colorado, so they're going to make sure they get in all their points and all the gate drops that they were due this year. Great addition having WMX back on the pro schedule for 2025. Okay, this topic, honestly, we haven't dove into it enough on this show. Now, there's another podcast that you and I do with Steve Mathis with Racer X, where we have spent hours trying to psychoanalyze and go through the bike rider combo with Jorge Prado. At this point, we got to bring it up on this show. To me, this is the final nail in the coffin, I think, of this relationship between Prado, the multi-time MXGP champ, and Monster Energy Kawasaki. We thought Ironman was a sign of progress. They had a new part on the bike. He was 5th overall. He seemed happier. Unadilla should have been a track that's good for him. He even told me on Friday, JT, the step they made with the bike at Ironman allowed them to take more steps after that. And then Unadilla was terrible. So let's just first talk about the Unadilla part.
Well, I think those steps you mentioned may have been steps backwards because this was not good at all. And I would say at this point, Jorge Prado is the only racer that has caused me to audibly talk to myself when I'm by myself about what's happening here. I simply can't figure out what's happening here. Every time I think he's going to turn a corner and show some sort of glimpse of what I know he's capable of, it seems like you get regression instead of progress. And Unadilla was absolutely that. The first moto going from 1st to 15th, a lot of that there is him kind of giving up in the moment. You simply don't lose 10 seconds per lap without some sort of, I don't like to use the word quit because it is a serious word, but he is disenfranchised, he's checked out in the moto, he's absolutely not giving his best effort anymore in that moto. That's how you end up 15th by the checkered flag. So we're approaching a point where I don't know how you come back from this as a part of Monster Energy Kawasaki. I believe we are entering some sort of fracture here where things are going to go from bad to worse. And I simply don't know if he's going to continue to be a part of that team for the long term.
Yes, so let's get to part 2 of this story here. That's the thing. We didn't overanalyze this because we're still trying to give that they're adjusting to each other grace period. But when you go all the way back now, it's like they're already back on square one. They're just as bad as they've been at any point in the season. I don't see how you can come back from this. So the details are this. He has a huge salary from Cowie and the option to race there for 3 years. He's not even through the first year of that deal. But I don't think he wants to be there anymore. And honestly, it's not doing much for them, for him to be putting in these kind of results and not being very friendly to the bike publicly in interviews either. Meanwhile, over at KTM, and that's the Austrian brand that Prado's used to racing for, they had prepared a 450 deal for 26 for Tom Vial. We believe Vial's not going to take it. He has an even more lucrative deal to go back to Europe, and that's understandable because I believe Vial can be a 450 champ in MXGP. Supercross, I don't know if even KTM's convinced of that. So there was an offer on the table. Vial's probably going to go to Honda, go back to Europe. I think Prado's people are like, hey, 450 KTM deal? Hello? That's what I'm hearing.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And remember, Prado leading up to this had never raced for anybody but KTM in his entire life. So there's a long-standing history that he could go back to there. But when you talk about the separation that could or couldn't happen at Kawasaki, what's there really to gain by moving forward? He's not happy. I can't imagine that management at Kawasaki is thrilled with results, his comments, the relationship, the future prospects. Nothing really seems to pencil out there. So if you're simply hanging on just because you have an agreement in place, that opens up the door to something else happening. And as you mentioned, Tom Vial departing to go back to Europe is the perfect scenario for Jorge to return to KTM, which is the most unlikely scenario I could have dreamt up in January. But here we are talking about how likely it could be. Now, he's going to have to take a massive pay cut to do this. And for him to be considering it, just to be willing to consider it, tells you how desperate he is for change at the moment.
Now, I mentioned the playoffs and that timing. There are other riders they're all systems go. We saw Cooper Webb now back on the bike, getting ready for playoffs. Ken Roxon already returned at Unadilla. He's not going to race Budge, but he'll be back for the Charlotte round. Aaron Plessinger trying to come around, and several others. So this is going to be almost an annual tradition. Chase Sexton, we hope, as well, of riders getting rested and ready for playoffs in September.
Yeah, we're going to be close to full capacity. I don't think we're going to see Jason Anderson, but everybody else seems like they're going to be on the starting line and ready to go when we get to ZMAX Dragway. The one question I have, and you touched on it, is Chase Sexton going to be there and ready to go? I think he is. Sounds like he is. Logic would tell you he is. But I'm not 100% convinced. So let's just watch for that. Let's hope that cooler heads prevail here. But I don't think he was all that thrilled about returning when he left Ironman. So hopefully for the series, hopefully for Team USA at Motocross Nations, none of that. It really kind of took hold. But I think that's the one name we still have to watch for, because everybody else looks like they're ready to go for 3 playoff rounds.
Yeah, from all reports, he was definitely not happy leaving the track at Ironman. So yeah, kind of the way you summed it up is it. Was that just I literally just crashed my motorcycle while I was in the lead. I was pissed off for a few days. Who wouldn't be? And by September, they're fine. Or is that going to linger? Was it an in-the-moment thing or not? Bubble Boy is Cody Schock, who's actually just outside the top 20, get this, in both classes to get into the SMX playoffs. So he raced very well in 250 regional supercross. I think he's 22nd in 250 points. That doesn't matter because he wants to race the playoffs on a 450, and there he is 21st. And I'm going to look at the stats right now. This is how close it is. He's 21st. Valentin Guillaume is 20th. Mitchell Harrison is 19th. And there is only 11 points between those three fighting for the final 2 guaranteed spots on the gate. Otherwise, you're a wild card, and you got to race your way in every weekend. And trust me, those 3 riders know it with 2 motos to go.
Yeah, and Cody's had a fantastic year. You know, he's probably wishing he could kind of transfer some points over, maybe even at a discount, bump some of those points. But I do think he will end up on the 450, and I do think that's the best pathway for him. It's more money. I think he's ridden the 450 very well, and I think there will be more opportunity in the SMX World Championship playoffs for him than the 250, because that 250, when you stack both classes together, that's the best word. It is stacked. And if you get a bad start, you can be fighting with prior race winners, guys like Jordan Smith, or take your pick, in 17th and not go anywhere. Where I think the 450, he's a great starter. He'll put himself in a good spot, and I expect him to be battling somewhere between 9 and 12 for most of those races.
Okay, SMX playoffs. Let's just talk about it here in general. This is the schedule. We mentioned September 6th a lot because that is the kickoff when we'll have a lot of these questions answered at ZMAX Dragway, part of the Charlotte Motor Speedway complex. And then we go to St. Louis. Very unique, supercross-ish, but if you really look closely, not quite supercross track there at the Dome. And then the finale is at another drag strip, the 4 wide strip there in Las Vegas for the finale. What do you think when you see these tracks, JT?
Well, I think we know what we're going to get out of the 2 of the 3 that are returning. That St. Louis round, to me, is the wild card. It really feels and looks like a more traditional supercross track, just minus the supercross loop. So that's going to be a fun one. I think being inside, having climate control conditions, is going to throw us right back into the spring when we're used to these supercross conditions, that maybe it has an effect on the overall outcome as well, because it is much more supercross than the other 2.
Okay, that's nearly a wrap for this show and Pro Motocross in the regular season of 2025. Give you an idea of how, when, where to watch the broadcast from Budds Creek. Everything's East Coast time, so it makes it pretty simple. Race day live, qualifying coverage 1 hour at 10 a.m. on Saturday Eastern time, and then the motos start at 1 o'clock. Don't forget, WMX final moto of the year will take place in between the first and second motos for the other classes. So that's 5 motos we'll show you live, and live post-race coverage, which here is really cool because there's extra awards. There will be the Manufacturers Cup, Mechanic of the Year, Team of the Year. Someone will be crowned 250 Motocross Champ. Someone will be crowned WMX Champ. That's all going to be fun. You can watch it all on Peacock.
Hi folks, Lee Diffie from NBC Sports. If you enjoyed what you just watched, well, it's time to bring the action and subscribe to the Motorsports on NBC YouTube channel. You can have it all. News, highlights, interviews, and analysis. So go for it.